Okay, so just a moment. Let me share the screen on the other account. Okay, I think. Okay, give me a minute. I think I messed up some. Oh, hang on. Can someone help me reply to this fork on the on the location of our group? So okay. So last week we was talking about Azure Storage replication options, and I went and really looked deep into this, and there would be, well, from my experience, there would be some, some questions on select, like the multiple region, and actually you can see that in the Azure learning path where they will have questions on this, on how to select like different regions that reflects the that reflects your choice, your strategy choice on cutting the cost, on like secure your application and your storage depends on your application needs. So let me first show you this. Skip this. I want to tell you one trick on for the exam, and from the past experience, I see that it come true. So I just want everyone to be aware of this. So these are one of the module for data engineer DP 200 test. So like when you go to the Microsoft website, there will be like the exam, the content, and then like the path they recommend you to take to learn about the exam. So this is one of the paths, and there is a scenario on this. So normally pay attention to the scenarios, because a lot of the time when the exam come out, the scenarios is have the elements of the Microsoft Learn path. So of course, like they're not gonna like do things 100% the same, but then there are some elements on this. So really pay attention to this. So in here, they was talking like how you select the different redundancy, how you select different storage to fit with your application. So that's why I want to deep dive into this a little bit more to prepare for you guys for the scenario for the exam. So before that, since we talked a little bit about different storage replication options last time, so how about we do some educated guess on this, and then we'll go through this model, and also I'll talk more about different security on cloud, because even though like when I look at the DP 200, the main component that they test about security will be dynamic masking, which you guys have learned in the first few sessions, and also encryption address, which we haven't touched on. But then, just in case, since they talk about like replication, since they talk about like different tools to provisioning cloud storage, let's just be safe, and let's just add in like things like share responsibility on cloud, like what is your responsibility, when is it your responsibility to take care of the storage, and things like ID management and role-based account management. And this I would like just really touch briefly, so that at least you have the awareness of where the elements is, and what are the practice for security blob storage, or like different security management that is available on cloud. So that is my plan for today's session, and also decide how to choose storage will be a good materials for you to assess when you are deciding for the scenario based questions. So let's see if we can get through it. And after this, I think you have 70 to 80% of the information for you to start the exercise on the Azure Learn, and for you to take a deep dive into the architecture and the models. We won't be able to do the architecture this year. So next year, when we see one another again, we will have a talk on that. But meanwhile, for the few weeks that we don't have the we don't have the sessions, please go ahead and go to Microsoft Learn and start the exercise and start the quizzes on there, because you already have the basic knowledge. So what you should do is how we're gonna do now is that you take the educated guess first, and then you go back and you read the articles, and then you see how you make the mistake, and then you take the test, you take the quizzes again to make sure that you will remember on the content. So let's take some quick quiz on this first. And just guessing, I know like there's some content that I went a little bit too brief last time, so you might not remember, but then we will go through it again. So just a quick guess. What is the answer for question 1? So remember this: business critical requires redundancy policy, and other is non-critical and local redundancy policy. So which one that you need to select to consider about data diversity and cost sensitivity for the question? And this will be something that you need to consider where no matter which cloud you use. So this knowledge will be applied for other clouds as well. So let's take a minute to sink in and think about our answer. You guys can just guess the answer on the chat, then don't worry about right and wrong. Okay, so we have the first one. Let's try. So remember local redundancy. What is it in the model? Multiple replicate across the data center. So there's no different zone here. Okay, that's all right. Any other guess? Then we will, okay, 3. Okay, we will leave it there. So let's do 1 first, and if it's not correct, then we will do 3. Okay, the name of the storage account must be, we will go through this storage account. And this question will apply to AWS also. So the second question, what do you think? Whether it needs to be unique in just your resource group, or it has to be like unique throughout your Azure subscription, or it has to be unique like everywhere, so no one will have the same storage account name as yours. So which one would it be? Don't look at the answer yet. Just try, guys. Third one. Okay, that's good. So the part 3. Question 3. In typical project, when you create your storage account, so when you start your storage account at the beginning, after the deployment, at the end. Okay, let's see. Okay, this one correct, this one is not correct. So let's see if Stu correct on this. Awesome. So let's see here. So why LSS is not correct? So if you look at this chart, LSS is you only replicate across the data center, and it's only protect against things like this, not rack failures. So if you have some issues with the hardware in one center, then in one data center, then you have another data center to rely on, and this is the default options. But then in here, when you see this business critical, so what business critical is, that means like it cannot be failed regardless of your location. So like remember when I when I give you an example last time, when like, for example, if your, if your data center, like, for example, if the whole country, Singapore, they somehow they lost access to the internet or the network or the electric, something happened, North Korea bombing them. So the whole region is down. So you need to have like a backup from other region to be able to protect your business critical activities. So that's why you need to replicate it in different geography. So multiple replicate across each of two regions. So you see, you have the primary one, for example, Singapore or Vietnam to get your data from, and you also have asymmetric in the secondary region, for example, Europe, for example, North America. So it's not syncing all the time. It's syncing async like asynchronized. So eventually it's an eventual consistency. That means eventually it will sync up, but then it's just there for backup. If something happened, you have the secondary to start your service already. So that's why it's the second option. So when you see business critical, remember about GIS. Okay, so let's go to some of security features, and let's let's talk about storage account. Since we just do the quiz, let's talk about this, and then we will talk about other things. Okay, so let me go to the Microsoft Learn. It has more pictures in this part. And it's really, really good tools to learn it from. It's just a little bit messy, I think. The path is sometimes it's too long. So okay, so in the second part of this series, we have learned about what are the Azure Storage and what are the options in the Azure Storage. So just remind you guys, when we talk about Azure Storage, it's the object storage like blob, files, queue, and tables. So please take a look at the second part again. This is the first few slides of the second part for this. So these are the Azure Storage. And besides Azure Storage, we have Azure SQL and Azure Cosmos DB, and also Data Lake, which is built on Azure Blob Storage. So just a quick reminding for you guys about what is Azure Storage. So we have the storage, and what is the storage account? So the storage account is the container that the group sets for all the Azure Storage service together. So in here, like if you want to access your blob, your queue, your file, your table, you need a storage account, and only data service from Azure Storage can be included in the storage account. Is what I mean, like all the data service here is blob, file, queue, and tables. So here the illustrating of this. And in here you can see that when you start log into Azure, you have to create a subscription, and under the subscription you have the resource group, and in the resource group you will have a storage account to control and to manage your service. So storage account is in this sense is only contain the storage account for blob, file, queue, and Cosmos DB. They also have the independent resource group, and you cannot clump these two together. So basically you can see here. So subscription, one subscription you can have multiple resource group, and once a resource group you can have like storage accounts that contain all of your object storage, and Cosmos DB, Azure SQL, they belong to the resource group, but they don't belong in the storage account. So when you see the storage account, remember it's only for these blob, file, queue. Okay. So here's the setting of the storage account. So you need to have the subscription. you have to have the location, which is, you know, like where you store the data from. And I'll tell you ahead that the location that you select, it will reflect the pricing of the storage. And that's why it's recommended to have you know, storage accounts that be in the US data center, for example, so that like if you have activities in that region, then select the storage account there would be cheaper to access the data, instead of like, you know, if your activities, if your edge devices, for example, in US, and you have the storage account in Asia, then the data access will be a little bit more expensive than if you are in the same region. So in here we have the replication, which we have talked about. So, you know, LRS, GIS, please make sure to learn this term very carefully, because you know, the scenario in the Microsoft Learn, so likely they will ask something similar with the same element in the case study, which is very long and a lot of details and very difficult to remember. So it's actually one of the hardest part when it comes to Azure certification. So don't take it lightly. So in here you have access here. So, you know, you can control, you know, the access of the blob storage. So and also different access for like cool, hot, and cold, which we talked about in the last time. And these are just like secure transfer virtual network, which, you know, is for setting up your account and different rule to access your account. So okay, this one we just talk about of a strategy of how to decide how many storage account do you need. So so look at this here, a note. So hope you can see my drawing. Location, replication, subscription owner. So please remember this very, very well, because things like asking about implementing a strategy will be on DP 201. So, you know, if you, because normally you have to take these two exams, so you have to take the two exams together to be certified as data engineer on Microsoft. So if you take just DP 200, you will be only certified at like, I don't remember the whole name. So practice data engineer on Microsoft, like, you know, in Microsoft Learning Path, like if you want to certify on the role, so depends on your role, you have like 2 exam or 1 exam. If you just do one, then you won't be certified for that role. Microsoft is a role-based model, so you need to do 2. So, you know, remember this for the other exams. So remember, when you need a storage account, you need to consider about your location, where your business is based, what is it need, whether it's business critical or whether it's mostly in just one region. Then you need to select the service that close to that region, whether it's like need the hot access tier. So, you know, it always have to move, the data have to move, the data has to access a lot, or whether it's like just cool tier or archive tier, where like you really don't want to you know, to use the data that often. And replication strategy, which we just talked about. So subscription owner, so, you know, who are using the subscription. So okay, you need one storage account for every group of setting that you want to apply your data. So, you know, you have to have like one separate storage account for location, for example, West US, and one location, for example, like Asia or North Europe. So, and this applies to other services as well. So, you know, like, and this is one of the area where I see people asking question a lot, because, you know, sometimes they select a different zone and they go to their services, at least on AWS, they go to their services and they don't see their service anymore, and they wondering like, what happened to their service? So this is what happened. You are in the wrong zone. So always make sure to choose the zone correctly, and always make sure to choose the zone strategically. What the location you choose will not only determine, or here they also determine your data diversity, cost sensitive, and tolerance for management overhead. So when you choose the storage account, when you choose your region, remember about this. You need, whether you need your data to be different locations, what is the constraint on the cost, what is your tolerance in like failure, in like delay. So all of this you need to consider before choosing the storage. So let me clear this. So in here, they explain a little bit more on what does it mean by data diversity, what does it mean by cost sensitive, and what does it mean by tolerance. So let me quickly sum up for you guys, and you guys can read more when you guys at home on the next couple of weeks that we don't have the class. So okay. So basically data diversity. So you need to be able to access data in different location, whether like where is your main consumption. So all of the questions like that is the decision for data diversity. And feel free to let me know if you have questions on this, because it's actually very important, whether you work with Azure or AWS, or any other cloud. This always gonna be affect your cost for the organization. Actually, a big chunk of the cost is like, because storing data in the cloud is not really expensive. The expensive like when you consume it, when you query your data form, that the main expense could be for it, the usage of the data. So you want to be strategy on the diversity, the location of the data. So cost sensitive, again, multiple storage accounts to reduce the cost. Why it reduce the cost? Because multiple storage account could be more cater to your need. For example, for example, your usage is only mainly in the you let me get to my real use case here. So like I use, for example, I use a service of analyzing data from a third provider that only accessible in America. So if I upload my data to a blob storage, and that blob storage I choose to be in Singapore, then after that I have to move all of the data to America for the third provider to help me with the data analytics. So my cost could not be the cost of uploading to the cloud. So my cost could be like the cost of like storing the data on Singapore region, and then move it from Singapore region to America region. So let me draw it out for you so that you understand why multiple accounts might reduce your cost, because this is the real case that I had. So so I have one in Singapore. Oh, this doesn't come well. Okay, so I have one in Singapore, right, where I upload my data. So let's say this be on-prem. So I have to load the data into Singapore, and again I have to load it to the US, right, for the third provider to have with like the data lake to analyze it. So my cost from transfer like a huge chunk of data from Singapore to the US would be very expensive, because it's cross region. The cost of like, because this data is already on cloud. So I was charged for putting it here, and I also had charged to moving it to another region. So another solution, how about if for the data that is not time sensitive, that is not critical, that is with the batch processing, how about if we accept the delay time, how about we, instead of moving like all of data from Singapore and Singapore to US, we accept the delay time. We move some of the data that we don't care about how fast it is to transfer. We just care about like it's gonna be there in a few days. To have another account here, to have another account on the US, right? So basically, because I can access directly to this provider, is a third party, right? So I can access to their storage. I have to transfer from somewhere else storage to there. And for example, I cannot like let this provider go directly to my on-prem database because of the security reasons. They cannot like exactly connect to this. I have to go through this step of like storing my data on cloud first and then move it to their account. So how about in this scenario to reduce the cost, multiple storage accounts could be used. So basically, you transfer the data to the US. So that is one half of the cost, right? But from US to here, because they are the same region, so there's no cost occur. Okay, so consider these both are in the same platform. It's not gonna work if one in Azure and one in the AWS. So my third provider had to be in the same platform with me. So basically, now that I only pay one-time cost for this account, and because since this is in the same region, I don't pay another cost to transfer the data here. So basically, here in this model, I have to pay one time to be in Singapore, right? To load the data. Loading data is not costing, but storing the data in Singapore is one cost, and then moving it to US region is the second cost. While in here, there's only one cost occur, that is, storing the data. You see, storing the data here. Of course, like on-prem to I'm missing one. So on-prem to on-prem. Okay, sorry, got messed up. Okay, so in here, basically, I just pay for the storing. I don't pay for the transferring. And while on here, I have to pay for both storing and for transferring to the region. So you can see here how multiple storage accounts can reduce the cost in this model. You guys got it?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. And this is the real case, and I was occur with this when I start. So it depends on your business. If you are all right with the latency, if not business critical, you can leverage this very well. So let me clear this. Okay. Torrents for management overhead. So what it is that each storage account requires time and attention to maintenance. So the more complexity of your data, the more the more rules you need to create. So you have to wait between like, okay, you have different storage accounts, you have different rules. So it's minimize the cost, but how about security? How about billing? So depends on your strategy. You will need to consider these three factors. So I'm going to repeat again. Data diversity, cost sensitive, and tolerance for management overhead, which is basically security and rules. So these are the strategy that you need when you create the storage account. All right, so let's go to the account setting, and let's be brief for this. So basically, you need to create name, and account name must be globally unique, as we learned in the last time. So globally unique again, lower letters, digital, between 3 and 24 characters, and it cannot be the same with other people. So if you created one account, for example, you name Azure 1, then you cannot create another account in the same name, or anyone can create the account in the same name with you, anyone that exists in the Azure services globally. So that's why it's called global unique. So deploy model, I will briefly talk about the API to deploy model. So in here, you can see that we have two types of API. So resource management API and secure and service management API. Okay, so resource management is the current model that use Azure resource management, and this is the default, and most of the Azure resource will work with the resource manager. So in the exam, if you are tested and if you're not sure of the answer, then the default you should go for resource manager for this. Okay, so let's talk about the accounts type. So please only worry about storage V2. Anything that is V1 is disregarded in the exam already. So you don't need to worry about the V1. And actually in the last class, I was showing, I think, Caris about, let me show with everyone again. I'm not sure if you guys all see it yet or not, but let me just show you guys again to make sure that you see this. Okay, I think they removed this. So a few weeks ago, they was changing the exam, and let me see. And yes, so anything that was Gen 2 V2 is the one that we currently tested in here. So don't worry about V1 Gen 1. Even if you use the materials on plural side or other side on this, so just remember V1 Gen 1 storage V1 for this. Blob storage, legacy kind of allow block blobs and append blobs. So it's also the legacy already, but then the exam is still keep it there. So just need to learn briefly about that. Focus on storage one is basically the same, but then there's more supporting type, and they have latest features. So Microsoft is pushing it. So most of the time you will see the storage version 2 or the data lake V2 on the exam. Okay, so we have the account creation. So these are the standard for most of the services on Azure. So you have the portal, which is like, oops, sorry, I think someone messaged me. So you have the portal, of course, like you access to the Azure interface on web. You have the CLI, which you can access to your server. And again, PowerShell, which is the standard product of Microsoft, to let you write, create scripts for you management the libraries. So these are the tools that are available. So we did the quiz on this at the beginning of the class already. So we won't go over it again. So I just want to show you briefly. So this is the Azure portal. You go here and you select the storage service. And you create first, you have to choose the subscription, and you choose the resource group, then you choose your location. The storage, you can see the storage V2, right? And you choose the type of replication. The default will be locally redundancy, and depends on your need. You can choose it in different type, as I showed in here. So different type of service that you can have in here. Oh, I lost the tab. Oh, where is this? Okay. Okay, and then network and routing, and data protection on this. So whether you like whether you delete or soft delete on this, delete file shares, turn on versioning. And remember, turn on versioning, that means additional cost for you. For example, if your data, today there is one version and tomorrow you upload the same file on, and you know the old version is still keeping there, and it will occur the cost over time. So please be very, very carefully when you turn on the versioning, because that will be extra cost. And always please make sure to have the plan. Like if you turn on the versioning, how do you like delete the old version that you not use anymore? So please remember to have that option in mind, or else your charge for storing the cloud will be huge. Okay, and in here we have like advanced option like secure transfer, and minimum TLS version to support the transfer. And you can go through this in the next 2 weeks to while we don't have the class in the next 2 weeks for this. But pay attention more on different details that I mentioned about, like strategy to use the blob storage, and how to use and different sorry, let me go back again to like different strategy to use blob storage, like data diversity on the cost sensitive torrents, like simulate your strategy in mind to prepare for the screening for the scenario questions on this. Okay, so here the portal. Okay, sorry. Okay, so we go through the knowledge check already. So please remember to redo it again if you got the question wrong. So that's it for the account, for the storage account. So the rest of the time, let's go through the security module a little bit on this. I know that we have very limited time left. We have a few more minutes left. So let's go through this so you can have some foundation before we take a rest for 2 weeks. Okay, so we have the security recommendation for blob storage. And here the recommendation. So use Azure Resource Manager to deploy a model. So basically in here, they recommend you to use the Azure role-based account, role-based account access control for managing the control of your accounts and your services in here. So in the resource management control, there's different tools for, like for example, manage identities, access to key vault for secret keys, and Azure AD, which is basically they will control you on authentication and authorize to access the storage. So when you create account, you need to grant the access. So when you create the account, when you create the account, and you can of course access that through the Azure Portal, but it's only limited to your account, but not other services around it. So to be able to access other services, to access that, you need to grant the access for it. And how you grant access is through the role-based account and Azure AD to do that. And this is the recommendation on how to protect your data while using these services. So number one, again, use Azure RBAC. Number two, enable Azure Defender for all of your storage accounts. Okay, and just aware of the name. They're not gonna be going in deep of like different suspicious activity, because that is gonna be in another certification. So number one, use Azure RBAC. Enable Azure Defender. Remember the service name is Azure Defender. Number three is turn on soft delete for block data. Okay, soft delete. Remember there was an option for soft delete. So soft delete enable you to recover all of data that have been deleted. So if someone like accidentally delete it, it will be able to restore. So lock storage account to prevent accidental deletion. So you can, if you use the CLI command, it's very easy to happen. Like sometimes you accidentally uh, delete wrong items. So how you prevent it? So you can lock the storage account to actually prevent the delete of the whole storage account and the storage itself. Okay. So the another one is store business critical data in immutable blob. So what immutable blob is, it can write one and read many. So it's the acronym for this is warm state. So you can read, but you cannot modify, you cannot delete, and you can see more in the store business blob with immutable storage. So this is another option, and of course, like different token on accessing to it. Okay, so we will go a little bit on the Azure ADBC so that you guys can see about the options on there. Oh, but before that, let's talk about the share responsibility on cloud, because this is where the leading of Azure ADBC. So let me talk a little bit on this. So if you go with any cloud, like doesn't matter what cloud you go, they will talk about this concept of cloud provider share responsibility model. What does it mean is that any cloud provider will secure the underlying infrastructure. They're responsible to secure your cloud platform, but it's not ultimate. It's not like 100% responsible. So you still have the responsibility in the certain to set up certain control and measurements to secure your data in the Azure platform. So if anything happen, we will trace back to this shared responsibility to see like level which level is the cloud provider have to responsible for, and which level is the responsibility of others, of the users. So you can see in here like the different field that you need to responsible for. So for example, like on-prem, for example, of course you have to responsible for everything. So on-prem is not the form of cloud provider. Anything of these infrastructure as service, platform as service, SaaS is software service, is have different level of responsibility, and you can see this. Cloud customer is users is what we do, and cloud provider is Microsoft, AWS, GCP. So normally most of the cloud, besides the infrastructure of service, physical layer of security, that means like they guarantee that no one access to the data center besides the people who responsible for it. So multiple layers of security to secure the physical security is there for you to safeguard your data in their physical data server. But then when it go to like host infrastructure, so for example, you have a VM, then you are responsible to install, like for example, if you use the Windows server, for example, you need to install like antivirus. You need to set up internet rules that prevent certain access, or like no access outside, depends on your model. So certain things like that you need to secure at your side to make sure that your data is secure, and that if there is things that happen, this will be the model to see what level of the security that you need to apply. And almost in all of these models, actually, you need to like classify your data, who has access to what, client and endpoint protection. So basically, your endpoint, you need to secure your endpoint, And identity and access management is what we're gonna talk about next. So who allowed to access what, and how you set different level to certain people. That's only certain people who responsible to the data can access the data. So these are the topics that we will see next. Okay, and we'll go very, very briefly on this. So basically, I think this is the later one. Okay, so what is Azure RBAC? So basically, it helps you manage who access to the Azure resources, and what they do with those resources, and they have what they have access to. So if you guys have studied certificate MCSA before, then it's very similar to that. So you have Windows Server, and you define, like, for example, this group can access to which data, can use what services and stuff. So this is the same level. I mean, this is the same concept in the role-based access. And you can see here different let me see different role-based work. So you have like user, you have group, you have service, principal, and manage identity. And let me see on the different roles. Okay, I think this is. So please go ahead and read on here. So because most of these won't be on the test, and you will just need to awareness. That is the option that you can use to assign different people to access different data. They're not gonna ask you on deep on, like, like, for example, you want to access, like, you want to do all of this, delete, append, blah blah blah, and which role they gonna assign to. That will be on the Azure 103 or 104. Just need to remember that IBC is control who access your data, and you have like account administrator, which is like one per Azure account, and after that you have like service administrator, co-administrator, and things like that. So there will be more details. Just remember, you can control who access your data on this. Okay, we will talk about Azure Identity Management and Security Overview. So let's talk about first on what is identity management. So identity is actually very, very important in this part, because identity management is not about the person who authorized to access the services in your storage accounts anymore. We talk about the service in here. So before we talk about the actual person, right? Now we're talking about service. So for example, if I have an app and I want it to connect to a storage account, then this is what we need to talk about, Azure Identity Management. And you can control it through different practice in here. So the identity management capabilities, you have single sign-on, you have reverse proxy, you have multi-factor identification, and so on here. So let's talk about best practice and security checklist on this briefly. Okay, so in here you have a list of best practice for the identity management. So of course, the first one is that you need to take identity as the primary security perimeter. That means, like, the primary security measurement should be identity management. And remember, in the test, again, they highlight about dynamic masking. They're talking about encryption on rest, but then also remember, those are not supposed to be a standalone treatment. You're not supposed to, like, just have those level to control your data. If you go back on this model, sorry, let me go back on this. No. So if you go back on this slide, okay, so if you go back on this slide, we have the customer data, then we have the information protection, which is the layer of dynamic masking and encryption address that we talk about. But we also have the network security, which is like you have to set different proxy, and you know whether you allow it to go out in certain address or certain address to access it. And we have the access management, which is we are talking about access management and threat protection in which form of role-based control management and identity management, which to help you to with the access management on this. So let's go back on here. So remember, in exam, definitely don't treat dynamic masking and encryption address as the only measurement. Remember this model, and remember there's different layers on security on this. So centralized identity management. So you know what it means is that you know, sometimes when you control a server, you create different roles and different policy, and you know, like you create exception. So all of this, like it will be all over everywhere, and it's very difficult to manage. So what it advises is here, like you know, when you have policy, try to create a group and put all of the rules, all of the rules in the same group. For example, you have one group for example, like office admin, and in there you have like one common group to manage all the identity of the office admin personnel. So you have the one place to centralize all of that. You know, manage connect tenants. It's self-explained. You know, you need to manage all of the services that connected there, enable single sign-on, you know, turn on conditional access, a plan for routing security improvement, you know, like how you can plan for routine security improvement, sorry, like how you can improve your security, your different auditing, different recommendations routinely, yearly and half yearly, for example. Password management, very important. How you manage password management, like change your password after a certain time, you know, like expiring token, for example. Multi-factor verification for users, for example, you know, the Google Authenticator, for example, on your phone. To additional layers for this, use role-based access control, as we mentioned. Lower exposure to privileged accounts. So account privileged account, for example, like account with administrative ability, so only certain people. So you know, you don't use it to you don't use it for daily activities. For daily activities, you set up other accounts to manage that. The account with administrative privilege, you know, only certain people and only certain resource can access it. Don't give it to like everyone, you know, because sometimes when people like got restricted and they complain like, oh, this service, you know, I cannot do this, do that. You have to be strong, and you have to like lower the exposure of the private account, or you will lose the control of all of the others one. And you cannot control like who is have the privileged account. If everyone have it, you know, then when you have the problem, you are not sure where to chase the problem to the one that start the problem. So remember this. Control location where the resources are located. So you know, different resorts have the different locations. So be strategic about it. Use Azure AD for storage authentication. So let me see, we haven't talked about Azure AD yet. let me see if we can find this here. So Azure AD basically is the Active Directory. Oh, here. So it's a solution for identity management. So we have Azure role-based account and Azure AD. So Azure AD is multi-tenant cloud-based directory for identity management service from Microsoft. So in there, they have different roles and different access that you can access from, and it's a centralized the security control to user and services. So if you want to set up like services, or if you want to set up the server, the user to access your service, then Azure AD is the place to go. There's If you log into the Azure Portal, you can search for Azure AD, and that is where you set up for these services. So I think we cover what we need. Let me see if what is in there. Okay, so yes, so we go through this also. So that's it for our session today. So just remember again, we won't have the session for the next 2 weeks because we have a lot of us will have the exam LFCA. So if you are wonder about the details of the exam, please go to the forum